What up, people? James the Movie Critic here, and today I'm going to give you my ranking of every single season of the DC television show Arrow. Now, you may be surprised by my ranking, so make sure you stick around until the end to see which season I have ranked as number one. Hi, I'm James the Movie Critic, and welcome to my channel where I do versus battles, rankings, and movie reviews, and a lot of other stuff. So if you like what you see today, go ahead and tappity-tap that subscribe button down below and join the family. Let me give a shout out to one of my newest subscribers, Lucas Santos, who actually submitted the idea to rank each of the seasons of all of the Arrowverse shows. So I'm gonna do shows like Arrow, Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl, and I may do a couple of the non-canon shows like Vixen and Constantine as well. So show him some love in the comments, and if you have a show or a movie franchise that you want ranked, go ahead and drop it below in the comments as well as a like on the video, and I'll add it to the queue. As a warning, there are some spoilers in this ranking because in order for me to tell you why I've ranked these seasons how I have to go into some details. So if you have not finished the Arrow series, this is your last and final warning to click off. So kicking us off at number 8 is season 8. One, it only did a 10 episode run because it was the final season, and it spent the beginning half of that season doing a tribute to many of the fan favorite characters. So we got to see characters like Moira and Thea come back into play, but then the second half was pretty much completely geared towards preparing for this ultimate crossover with the Anti-Monitor and the other shows. And so as much as I would have enjoyed if it concentrated on even that, it mostly focused on Mia and William, which are Oliver and Felicity's kids, as well as Connor, who's Diggle's son from the future. And they were setting up this Canaries pilot that was gonna be a spinoff, which to me had no substance. It wasn't really well done or thought out. I also don't think that there was enough fanfare for the TV Canaries to justify an entire show. I'm pretty sure you will be able to tell pretty early on in this ranking that I think most of Arrow's best years were in the early years. At the end, they kind of began to tell the same stories, whereas in the beginning, the stories were still fresh. You had no idea what Oliver was gonna do. And then after a while, the characters just kind of became predictable. So the final season was the ultimate predictable season. You kind of knew exactly how it was gonna end. So that's why season 8 is the last one, or the first one on this ranking list for me. So at number 7, we have season 4. I think this was generally everyone's least favorite season. Why? Because this was the season where Arrow lost its identity to me, because it was meant to be, basically we all know it was a knockoff Batman. He was essentially the Green Knight or the Dark Knight of Star City. And so what Batman is in the comics, he's the one man amidst these god level superheroes with magic and metahuman abilities who are aliens, but Batman's kind of like that central core of like the everyman superhero that sits in the middle. That's what Arrow was in the Arrowverse. You had Supergirl, you had Flash and the Legends of Tomorrow, but Arrow always brought you back down to earth. And so in this season, they went really far away from that, and they brought in a villain, Damien Darhk, who's played by Neil McDonough, who I actually quite enjoyed him in the role because he was really funny. But the idea was that he was supposed to rival Ra's al Ghul. And so when you see him in action, Ra's could kill this guy in 2 seconds, man. Like, there's no way that he could actually rival him. And so they left the dark tones and kind of went for this light, kind of campy humor that really didn't land for me or I think any of the other fans. When they initially introduced Damien Darhk, I think the show started on a pretty strong note, but then contrary to what the fans wanted, they forced the whole Oliver Felicity romance, and then they killed off Black Canary, which I think everyone was kind of rooting for her and Oliver to get back together. Either way, it got tangled, it kind of felt jumbled and rushed. And then by the end of season 4, we were just playing with magic and we didn't really enjoy it at all. It also didn't land with me that Damien Darhk was supposed to be this all-powerful supervillain rivaling Ra's al Ghul who only wanted to take over Star City. So you're this big, powerful villain and your aspirations don't even span a nation, a state. You only want to take over a city. That's just not believable. And I don't think anyone fell for that. By the midway through, most fans were clamoring like, what are we watching? This is not a good story anymore. Which brings me to the finale of season 4. It was easily the most anticlimactic finale of all of the seasons, in my opinion. It ends up with Oliver and Damien Darhk fighting in the street, and it's like really bad choreography, and that's why it's number 7 for me. Now, coming in at number 6 is season 7. I actually enjoyed the beginning of season 7 because it was a really good execution of the prison storyline, because Oliver had revealed his identity to the world, told him that he was a Green Arrow. And so now he was forced into Slabside Prison, where all these villains knew who he was and they were ready to get him. So like almost every episode in the beginning was these stories of people trying to jump him, guards even trying to get in on it and kill him. And so we had to see him fend for himself. And we never saw Oliver, I feel like, at a much lower point than that season. It kind of got a little distracted at the midpoint because it started introducing for the first time Mia, which was Oliver and Felicity's child in the future. This was before I knew they were going to do the whole Canary show, so it wasn't that bad because they weren't setting up for a pilot as much. They were actually just telling a parallel story. But I just never loved the 2040 Star City arc. To me, it wasn't compelling. We didn't feel married to any of those characters enough that I wanted to see 20 to 30 minutes of a 40-minute show dedicated to this next generation of Team Arrow. For me, the highlight of season 7 was Oliver's discovery that he had a half-sister in Emiko. And so they had already been teasing this female archer who was kind of a mimic of the Green Arrow, and we were just wanting to know who it was, and they introduced this half-sister character, which kind of made the same routine play on Oliver has bad relationships with his family, but she had a different dynamic that made me excited for what this character was going to do. And while they didn't really resolve her character well to me by the end of her storyline in the show, I thought the introduction and the early scenes of her were really good. And at number 5, we have season 6. Season 6 was a very action-packed filled season. One of the main themes was Oliver trying to sell to the city and to the authorities that he was not the Green Arrow. So we got to see Diggle take on the hood and the mantle of the Green Arrow, even though he wasn't his full self, which if you watch the show, you know he had some issues with injuries and drugs that kind of limited him. But he really enjoyed taking on the mantle. So you saw him as well as Roy and a few others kind of help keep up the guys that Oliver was not the Green Arrow. One of the better parts though of this season was the civil war that kind of started within Team Arrow. You kind of had this fight of the originals versus the newbies. And so Felicity, Diggle, and Oliver, being the original 3 on the team, begin to alienate the newbies like Wild Dog and Black Canary, the 3rd iteration of her. But they just begin to go at it, and because they didn't believe that they were really being trusted as much, like there was an inner circle within the circle. And so that created a really cool dynamic because we got to see some infighting within the good guys. While at the same time, many of the villains were banding together. Ricardo Diaz, Black Siren, Anatoly, and a few others joined up in order to team up against Team Arrow. And getting to see that fight with all of the constant confrontation within Team Arrow, as well as the fights outside of it, made for a really good season. It was in this season that they let Katie Cassidy come back as Black Siren, and she really began to discover and explore, was she really a villain? Was she an anti-hero? Or was she finally going to actually live up to her doppelganger's name and actually be a hero? We also got to see the finale with Oliver finally admitting that he was the Green Arrow, and he traded himself going to prison for immunity for the rest of the team, since they all helped catch Ricardo Diaz. At number 4, we have season 3, and this season could have, and maybe even should have been, one of the best seasons of the show. And it is on the better side, it's in the top 4, but it wasn't my favorite. Arrow starts off facing a Batman iconic villain in Ra's al Ghul. The season starts off really dark because Sarah Lance, who we just got back from the grave, ends up dying pretty early in this season. And so right after that, we end up seeing Oliver lose to Ra's. I mean, completely gets beat, like not even close. Like he handles him quickly. It kind of gives you whiplash as an Arrow fan because up until this point, we've seen Stephen Amell as Arrow get better and better as a martial artist, as a fighter, fighting villains like Slade and the Black Archer. He was getting better and better, and then all of a sudden, facing Ra's al Ghul, he seemed like a kid, the spoiled rich kid who was back on Lian Yu for the first time, fighting Yao Fei. It was like, does he know how to fight at all? There were a lot of emotional up and downs in the season, especially because towards the second half, it becomes like Fast and Furious 8, where Vin Diesel's character turns evil and turns on the team. That's what happens here. Oliver is not on the team anymore, so Felicity, Diggle, everyone's doubting him. We're not sure if he's really turned evil because there seems to be like, is he hypnotized, or is he under mind control, or is he really out here working for Ra's al Ghul? Of course, like every other season, he eventually shows himself to be better, triumphant, It's not like he actually worked on a new skill. He kind of had a mental block, and once he decided I can beat Raish, he does beat Raish. So there were some elements of that season that I really liked a lot, that I felt like if they would have maximized on it, it could have been the best season of the show. But it wasn't. It ends up at number 4 for me. Now, before we get into the top 3, question of the day, drop in the comments, what is your favorite season of Arrow of all time? We're almost to my favorite season, but I want to know what yours is, and I'm definitely going to respond to every comment like I do on every video, so don't forget to drop it down below. Coming in at number 3, we have season 5. This is by far one of my favorite seasons and has one of the most well-received villains in Adrian Chase, aka Prometheus, in the show. Adrian Chase pushed Oliver more than almost any other villain in the show. And I would say, as far as his low points, he took him there, because Slade was one of the most mentally abusive villains to Oliver in the show, but Prometheus took it a step further. Like, nothing was off limits. Nothing was sacred to Prometheus. He went after his family, he went after his friends, he went after his reputation. And he was playing him as if he was a friend in his secret identity the entire time. So the whole time we thought Adrian Chase was working with Oliver, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, he's been working against him this whole time. And not at any point did I feel like he broke character or left a few breadcrumbs. I really thought Adrian Chase was on Team Oliver, Team Arrow for sure. And then all of a sudden this bomb drops. Since he pushed Oliver so hard, we got to see Stephen Amell kind of stretch himself as an actor, because this wasn't your typical villain where he had to play the emotional high, emotional down. I got beat, what do I do now? There was real hate and animosity between these two characters and betrayal, unlike any other character, and so we got to see him stretch as an actor for sure. And then after a really strong build-up, we get a pretty good finale, I think, where Adrian is defeated and sets up a dead man switch on Lian Yu and essentially blows up the entire island. He pulled it off. He is by far one of my favorite villains in the entire Arrowverse, not just the show Arrow, but all of the other shows in the Arrowverse as well. While every other season had mixed reviews, I think most fans would agree that season 1 was one of the most solid seasons of Arrow. It did a great job building the world of Green Arrow and introducing a main character that you felt sorry for, that was mysterious, that you didn't quite understand, but you also believed in his mission right away, which reveals the flashbacks, which while in later seasons the flashbacks almost got annoying because I felt like you were replaying certain scenes at a different camera angle, and so it changed the entire depth of the story. The flashbacks in season 1 did such a good job of captivating the audience and making us want to understand what really happened on this island. How did he change from a spoiled, rotten brat into this, assassin, killer? In that first scene where he gets kidnapped by those two guys who I think Moira sent after him just to see what he was made of, and he kills them and escapes, you're like, whoa, this is not the Oliver Queen I thought we were gonna get. And it also leaves enough breadcrumbs with each of the characters closest to Oliver to know that none of them could be trusted. Within 1 to 2 episodes, we did not trust Moira, his mom. We didn't trust Robert. We didn't trust Walter, nor did we trust Thea. We just weren't sure who was really after him, who knew his secret, what was the whole show about. I love season 1, and honestly, I would watch it again right now. The second year of Arrow is recognized by most as the greatest season of the show. For me, season 2 is my number 1. Not only did it follow up season 1 with such a good streak of good episodes, it introduced who I believe was the best villain all around for the show in Slade Wilson. Now, we had known him to be a friend in season 1 because of the flashbacks, but they were slowly alluding to a falling out that could have been because of the character Shadow that Oliver and Slade were slowly falling in love with, but also it seemed like there was more to it. He was a little bit spastic, there was anger behind it that seemed deeper, and we found out about the Mirakuru and all of these other pieces. We also got to see Oliver expand his team, welcoming in Felicity and Diggle officially because he didn't trust them at first in season 1. The showrunners also begin to open up the world and hit to the world of the Arrowverse, with Barry Allen appearing in 2 of the episodes that season. We knew that the Flash was coming. It was the history of the relationship between Slade and Oliver and how much they were getting into this deep brotherhood that they revealed to us through the flashbacks. I absolutely love season 2. It stands by far as the best season in my opinion. And I think there's a little distance between seasons 1 and 2 and the others because the showrunners knew exactly the story they were trying to tell. It wasn't as conflicted or confusing or tangled as the other seasons. You knew who the villain was, you knew who the hero was, and it's just the best, guys. I mean, if you have a different opinion, I love to hear it, but I need some reasons why. If you're gonna say that season 2 is not the best, come with the evidence. Otherwise, you can go somewhere else with that. Like I said, this has been my ranking of every season of Arrow. If you have a show that you want ranked, drop it in the comments below and we will definitely get to it. I'll also give you a shout out. Again, thank you so much, Lucas Santos. You gave me the idea for this. I was already thinking it through, but you gave me the confidence to go through with it. So if you have other shows, go ahead and drop them below and we'll see you guys soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.